There is one thing that separates human beings from animals. That is the ability to think, to reason, to use logic. If not for the ability to think, we would be monkeys throwing feces at each other. I mean, even with the internet, sometimes that's what we are anyway. But the ability to think, I mean, that's just crazy important. That's how we push the species forward. That's how we make the world a better place, how we change the world with ideas. Everything starts as an idea, which is why it's so important to be able to express your ideas coherently and in a way that they resonate with people. And one of the best ways to learn how to do that effectively is to look at the greats, right? The people who have already done it. How do they do it? And luckily for us, we have one that laid out 10 principles, 10 rules of writing for our writing to resonate. This was, of course, Friedrich Nietzsche. So in this episode, we are going to be exploring Friedrich Nietzsche's 10 rules for writing. But more on that in a moment. Hello friends, welcome to History for Thinkers, a show that brings history to life and makes it easy to understand with documentaries, discussion, and depth. My name is Michael McCauley. Make sure to subscribe if you're new here for more content just like this. And yeah, with that out of the way, let's get into Nietzsche's 10 rules for writing. So I think first and foremost, let's have a little background on where these rules actually come from, because I see people kind of copy and paste some of this stuff all over the internet, and it's like, where did it come from? What context was he writing this? So let's understand the circumstances that he's writing these rules. So he actually wrote these in a letter to Louis-André Salon. I'm very sorry, I know I mispronounced that. That's my thing. I can't be bothered to pronounce things properly. So he was actually friends with her. She was a female feminist psychoanalyst. She was a really great thinker. She was friends with Freud and all these other great people. Very influential. And Friedrich Nietzsche, he proposed to her. She rejected him. And then their relationship ended. And he proposed to her like the second time they ever met. You know, because Nietzsche was just kind of cringe like that. Surprisingly enough, she still valued his ideas. She wrote, books on him. She still studied him. She psychoanalyzed him. And, she's honestly a part of the reason that Nietzsche has been so influential, because she was so influenced by him. And it's just kind of helped his ideas to permeate throughout time. So these 10 rules for writing are in a letter to this person. And when she wrote about Nietzsche's writing style, she just had glowing praise. We'll read this quote here in a minute, but I mean, this isn't like, oh, hey, my friend makes the good words. This is like, I mean, they weren't friends for very long. I think they only exchanged a handful of letters, the second time they ever met. He proposed and it was awkward and she said no, and like that was it. So this isn't like someone writing about their best friend like, oh yeah, man, they're the best. This is like someone that like can admire a person's ideas and writings from afar, a very awkward afar. So she had this to say, quote, "To examine Nietzsche's style for causes and conditions means far more than examining the mere form in which his ideas are expressed. Rather, it means that we can listen to his inner soundings. His style came about through the willing, enthusiastic, self-sacrificing, and lavish expenditure of great artistic talents, and an attempt to render knowledge through individual nuancing reflective of the excitations of a soul in upheaval. Like a gold ring, each aphorism tightly encircles thought and emotion. Nietzsche created, so to speak, a new style in philosophical writing, which up until then was couched in academic tones or in effusive poetry. He created a personalized style. Nietzsche not only mastered language, but also transcended its inadequacies. What had been mute achieved great resonance." So she could not be more of a fan. She thought that he was an amazing writer, and when you think about it, I mean, that really is why Nietzsche's ideas have permeated culture so well. I mean, how many thinkers from that time can you name off the top of your head, right? Whenever it comes to someone who is remembered for their ideas or their writing or their artwork, you always have to look at the two sides of writing particularly, right? So there's the writing itself, right? How it's done. And then there are the ideas behind the writing. And I think they are both equally important. And Nietzsche, more so than probably any other writer in history, has just nailed it. I mean, he gets the ideas really well. I mean, he had some really crazy deep insights, which, if you really want to have an existential terror attack, oh boy, read some Nietzsche. It'll make you think about life, man. But, he just really hit the nail on the head on both the ideas and then the writing itself. Very crazy indeed. But that's enough jibber jabber. Let's actually get into these rules here. So, number 1. Of prime necessity is life, a style should live. And I think that's a pretty good one, right? You should have your own living, breathing style when you write. Something that's unique to you. Something that exists in itself. Fair enough. I don't think that there are really any writers who would disagree with that. Number 2. Style should be suited to the specific person with whom you wish to communicate. Now, this is actually something that is a really well-known idea in, copywriting and marketing and all that. Think about your target audience, right? What do you want to say to them? What's their background? How do they think? How do they speak? And then, cater your content to those people. I think that, a lot of people have noticed this. I think this is something that goes beyond just Nietzsche, and this is more of an observation than anything, because it just, Nietzsche surely wasn't the first person to think, oh yeah, who you communicate with should dictate how you communicate with them, right? I mean, I'm sure people before him weren't like cursing to their parents as they spoke to them, right? So it's like, we fundamentally understand this, but it's always nice when someone points it out. Number 3. First, one must determine precisely what do I wish to say and present before writing. Writing must be mimicry. And this is something you don't hear very much, because I think with number 2 there, people have said some version of that probably a bazillion times throughout history. But this third one is something you probably don't hear very often. And he's essentially saying that you need to think it before you write it. Which, I mean, it almost goes against some of what we hear, right? Because we always think, what is one of the number 1 tips that you look up when, if you want tips on writing and getting better at writing, it's, write more, write a bad draft, and then improve it, and then, figure things out as you go. Well, Nietzsche, I mean, here he's basically saying, right, think it the best it can possibly be in your head, and then write it down. Which is an interesting take on it. And it makes sense because he got sick in his life, right? And one of the things that he did was he started walking all the time. That was the only thing he could do, the only physical exercise. And it was after that, he starts walking, he started getting a little bit healthier. And that's when he was able to really write some of these crazy philosophical works that he's known for. So he just had a lot of time to think about what it is that he wanted to say. And then he sat down and he wrote it. So, this might not be a universal truth for all of us. Maybe it might work for some of us. I mean, it worked for him. Number 4. Since the writer lacks many of the speaker's means, he must in general have for his model a very expressive kind of presentation out of necessity. The written copy will appear much paler. Now, I think this is probably not the most unique insight in the world, but, again, it's one of these universal human truths about writing. At the end of the day, It's much easier to listen to someone speak than to read what someone wrote. Unfortunately, that is just the way things are. That's the nature of communication, right? I mean, you're sitting here, you're either listening to the podcast or you're watching on YouTube. Much easier than, reading some blog post about it or reading some book about it. It's just an easier form of communication. So if you're going to write, you got to make up for it. Luckily, we live in the 21st century, so we don't have to worry about that stinking writing thing. Anyway, number 5. The richness of life reveals itself through a richness of gestures. One must learn to feel everything. The length and retarding of sentences, interpunctuation, the choice of words, the pausing, the sequence of arguments, like gestures. This is like a really, really fancy way of just like practice, get good at it, understand how to do it and do it well. And again, it really comes with like the muscle memory of having done it for long enough. Nietzsche, he wrote a whole lot. We don't really know how much he didn't publish, but, there's a whole lot that he did. And I'm sure a lot of work and thought just went into everything that he ever did. And I'm sure that can be said about just about any writer in history. Number 6, be careful with periods. Only those people who also have long duration of breath while speaking are entitled to periods. With most people, the period is a matter of affection. Use periods, right? Shorter sentences, although if you read some of Nietzsche's work, he does not live up to this rule. Not a lot. Number 7. Style ought to prove that one believes in an idea, not only that one thinks it, but also feels it. Now, I think this is probably one of the best pieces of advice in here, because I think so often people are encouraged to just like to write, generally what's profitable. And to get the point across, I want you to imagine a scenario. Let's talk about Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump ran for president. He made a lot of people mad, did a lot of controversial stuff. We're not going to talk about politics, but I want you to imagine that Donald Trump wants to give a speech. And he can hire one of 2 people. One of them is a hardcore Democrat, very left-wing, the kind of person that would vote for Bernie Sanders. And then the other person is a supporter of his, right? Actually believes in Trump and his cause and the things that he does. Who do you think's going to write a better speech for Trump, right? Like when you have an example like that, it just becomes very obviously clear. So if you're going to write something that you think matters, you should not only think it, but you should feel it, believe it, live it. And then you can be sure that you're going to convey that idea the best way possible. Number 8. The more abstract a truth which one wishes to teach, the more one must first entice the senses. This might be one of the best principles in this entire thing. I think this is just such a wonderful idea right here, because I think when it comes to really abstract ideas, I think we do a really, really good job at explaining things and breaking things down. And that's good. There's definitely a need for that. But I think when you can get someone to feel an abstract idea, right? Put it into a narrative, put it into a story, make someone feel it on a visceral, personal, emotional level. The better chance you're going to have of them A, understanding that idea, and then B, actually agreeing with it, right? So if you want to convey something that is really abstract or really complex idea, and I know the kind of people that watch this channel, man. I know who's watching this. I know you guys got some complex ideas out there. If you want other people to understand it, man, you gotta entice the senses. Gotta entice those senses. Now, it doesn't mean flash them. Don't flash them. Don't do that. Not that way. Do it with your writing. Entice them with your writing, and then get your complex ideas out there. Number 9. Strategy on the part of the good writer of prose consists of choosing his means for stepping close to poetry, but never stepping into it. And I was so awestruck when I read this one because this is definitely something I thought about while I read Nietzsche's work, right? Especially like, I'm really hooked on Thus Spoke Zarathustra. I'm not sure I understand any of it, but when I read it, it is just so close to poetry, but it's not poetry. Like it is as close as you can get. And it's just such a weird thing. Like I said, Nietzsche's one of those people that in order to just get some of this stuff, you just have to read some of his stuff. But I don't know. Maybe we'll break some of his stuff down in the future. Who knows? We'll see. Drop a comment if you want to see that. Number 10. It is not good manners or clever to deprive one's reader of the most obvious objections. It is very good manners and very clever to leave it to one's reader alone to pronounce the ultimate quintessence of our wisdom. And I think that what he's saying here is that you need to include what you can, right? Tell the entire story, the entire argument, your entire thought. Get it all out there. And then let the reader determine what is the best piece of wisdom that, if you have any, right? But anyway, that has been 10 Rules for Writing by Friedrich Nietzsche. Very, very well put, very interesting. And, as I went through those, I just think back to everything I've ever read by him. And honestly, I think almost all those principles almost always apply, except for the one about periods. Because god dang, some of those sentences get really long. Don't even get me started on that though. Anyway, I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Be sure to drop a like and let me know if you want more philosophy content, maybe more stuff on Nietzsche in general. But anyway, thank you so much for listening all the way through. This has been Michael McCauley at History for Thinkers. I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.